The stars looked calm, but it was only a lie. Behind the silence of space, entire worlds had been destroyed. Human colonies, once bright with life, now drifted as broken shells, burned by alien weapons that cut through steel like paper. The airless silence of those ruins was worse than any scream. What was left of humanity carried only fear, hiding in shadows, waiting for the end that seemed certain. Ships floated as wreckage around shattered planets. Some still carried the marks of desperate battles. Holes torn open by plasma fire, crews never found. No colony sent signals anymore. Cities on Mars gone. Outposts near Jupiter's moons lost. Even Earth itself stood quiet, scarred, its defenders broken. Everyone whispered the same thing. Hope was gone, and yet not all voices were silent. Somewhere deep in the dark, a transmission spread. It was not loud, not long. It was not even clear. But it carried a message across empty space, one that cut through the hopeless silence. The message repeated again and again, as if the universe itself wanted every survivor to hear. Armada Protocol. Firestorm. Those 3 words reached broken ships hiding among asteroids. They reached half-ruined carriers drifting without power. They reached captains who had sworn never to fight again. The words were strange, almost forgotten, but they carried a weight too heavy to ignore. Firestorm was not just an order. It was a call. In the far edge of a dead system, a frigate captain sat in his chair, the glow of failing lights casting shadows across his face. He had lost everything, his crew cut in half, his ship barely able to move. He had told himself there was no point in going on, yet when the words reached his console, he felt something he had not felt in years. His fingers trembled as he whispered them aloud. Armada Protocol Firestorm. Across the galaxy, similar moments happened again and again. A destroyer's crew, down to less than 20 souls, listened in silence as the words played. A battleship with broken weapons suddenly changed course, its engines flaring to life. Small patrol ships, hiding like prey, turned their noses toward a single hidden location. No one gave orders to resist. They simply obeyed the call as if humanity itself demanded it. Rumors spread as quickly as the signal. Some said Firestorm was a secret plan hidden for years, waiting for this very moment. Others said it was only a myth, a desperate trick to gather survivors before the aliens found them. But no one could deny how the words felt. They were heavy, dangerous, alive with something stronger than fear. The aliens continued their hunt. Their war fleets burned through one colony after another, laughing at the weakness of human resistance. To them, the war was nearly over. They saw no threat, no weapon that could stop them. But they did not know that something was moving in the shadows. Small sparks of fire carried by broken ships and broken crews were gathering. Every survivor who heard the call felt it in their bones. They had been running, hiding, surviving without purpose. But Firestorm gave them something different. It was not the promise of safety. It was the promise of vengeance. A pilot sat alone in her fighter, drifting with her dead squadron. She had cried until no tears were left. When the words came, she laughed bitterly. "We are ashes already," she said. But still, she turned her craft, engines burning toward the dead star coordinates hidden in the transmission. Slowly, piece by piece, the forgotten pieces of humanity began to move. Engines lit up across space. Fleets that had been shattered began to crawl together, like fragments of broken glass pulled into the same fire. The order had not come from a leader. No one knew who sent it, yet everyone obeyed. The battlefield was not yet visible. The enemy still ruled, still hunted. But in the cold emptiness of space, a new sound rose. The sound of engines that had been silent for too long. The sound of voices returning to comm channels. Names and call signs spoken once again. It was not hope. Not yet, but it was something sharper. Something dangerous. The words carried it like fire across the void. Armada Protocol. Firestorm. And with those words, the darkness before the fire began to tremble. Humanity was not finished, not yet. The battlefield was waiting, and soon, the silence of broken worlds would burn. The dead star was cold, its light long gone, its heart turned to ash. Around it, silence stretched, endless and heavy. Yet into that silence came the hum of engines. At first, only one ship drifted close, a battered frigate with scars from battles it should not have survived. Then another followed, a cruiser with half its armor missing. Then more, broken, limping, but moving with purpose. They came one by one, answering the signal that had reached them through the void. Captains who had sworn never to fight again plotted new courses. Pilots who had seen their squadrons die turned their ships toward the same coordinates. It was not trust that pulled them here. It was something deeper, something hard and sharp, desperation mixed with fire. The gathering was not beautiful. Many ships carried damage so deep it was a wonder they still held together. Burned hulls, shattered wings, black scars of plasma fire. Some were missing entire sections patched with scrap just to hold air. Crews moved slowly, thin and tired, faces pale from too long in the dark. But when they saw each other, when comms lit up with voices long thought dead, a new energy began to rise. This is Destroyer Iron Dawn. We thought we were alone. This is Carrier Solace. Half our decks are gone, but we still fly. This is Patrol Ship Aegis. We're ready for orders. Voices filled the void. Ships that had been ghosts came back to life. Names spoken with disbelief as if the dead were returning. Every arrival added to the weight of the moment. The star was dead, but around it something powerful was being born. Among the fleets there was no leader yet. No admiral stood at the center, no council gave commands. And still they gathered. The order was simple. Armada Protocol. Firestorm. No one needed more than that. In the middle of the rally point, an old battleship turned slowly, its engines coughing out sparks. Its hull was covered in scars, its guns silent for years. On its bridge stood a captain who had once fought in the first battles of the war. He looked at the growing fleet, and for the first time in years his eyes burned with something close to pride. "They came," he whispered. His voice was rough, filled with smoke and memory. Against all odds they came. Not everyone who arrived believed. Doubt spread across comm channels. Some captains argued this was madness. We are too weak. Too broken. We cannot fight them. Others whispered that Firestorm was a trap, that the aliens themselves had sent it to draw the last humans out of hiding. But still, the gathering did not stop. For every voice that doubted, 2 more ships appeared. Frigates, destroyers, old carriers pulled from hiding. Even a dreadnought, long thought destroyed, limped into the rally point, its massive bulk casting shadows across smaller ships. When its systems lit up, the entire fleet went silent for a moment. A weapon of war, reborn from the grave. Crews watched in awe, speaking to each other over open comms. For so long they had been scattered, divided, powerless. Now they saw strength forming again, not perfect, not whole, but enough to make even the void feel alive. The Dead Star became a beacon, its cold silence broken by engines, voices, and the glow of ships gathering in formation. It was no longer a grave. It was a promise, and yet fear still lingered. Every survivor remembered the losses. Planets burning, cities destroyed, families gone. The aliens had taken everything. To rise again meant to risk it all, to face death once more. But the alternative was worse. To do nothing was to let humanity vanish without fire, without a sound. In the quiet of the command channels, an old voice finally spoke. No name, no title, only words carried across the fleet. If we fight, we may die. If we hide, we will die. Firestorm is not hope. Firestorm is fury. We burn because they tried to take our fire from us. Now together we burn them back. The words spread like lightning. Crew members repeated them to each other. Pilots whispered them before closing their helmets. Engineers carved them into walls. Firestorm was no longer just a signal. It was becoming belief. The fleet grew until thousands of ships circled the Dead Star. Not perfect, not strong, but united. Each scarred hull, each broken crew, each tired voice added to the storm that was rising. The gathering was complete. Somewhere in the distance, alien sensors flickered. Their hunters noticed strange movements, whispers of human ships moving in the dark, but the aliens did not yet understand. They did not see what was coming. The gathering was not only a fleet, it was a spark in the ashes of humanity, and sparks, when pulled together, became fire. They waited there, silent but alive, like wolves circling before the hunt. The Dead Star glowed faintly from the light of their engines. Soon it would not be the only thing burning. The Armada was awake. The fleet hung in the dark like a scattered constellation, ships drifting in slow orbits around the Dead Star. At first glance it looked fragile, a patchwork of broken hulls and scarred armor. But then, one by one, lights began to flare. Systems long dormant hummed back to life. Generators powered up. Weapons rotated into position, shields flickered like waking eyes. The Armada was stirring. A low tremor rippled through the void as engines roared in sequence. It was not planned, not ordered, but it felt like instinct. Carriers activated their hangar bays. Frigates linked communication grids. Cruisers aligned their sensor nets. Thousands of pieces clicked into place. As if the fleet had remembered what it once was. The silence that had ruled for so long was broken by voices, by command codes, by the rhythm of discipline returning. The humans did not cheer. They were too tired for celebration. Instead, they worked. They patched cables, calibrated railguns, fueled fighters. Broken ships offered spare parts to others. A carrier with no engines became a repair dock for smaller frigates. A destroyer with crippled guns shared ammunition with its neighbors. Every vessel had been incomplete alone, but together they were becoming something terrifying. In the center, the dreadnought loomed. Once it had been a legend, its name whispered by enemies with fear. Now it had returned from the edge of destruction, battered but alive. Its reactors glowed like a beating heart, and when its main cannon powered up, the light cast across the fleet was blinding. Crews watched in silence, their breaths caught. The dreadnought's awakening was more than steel and firepower, it was a promise. Humanity had teeth again. Rumors spread quickly through comms. Some said the Armada was now larger than the fleets that had once defended Earth. Others claimed secret ships were still on their way. Experimental warships, weapons never before used in battle. The truth did not matter. Belief was enough. For the first time since the war began, the survivors looked at each other and saw not just survivors. They saw warriors. An old captain stood at the bridge of his cruiser watching the tactical displays light up with hundreds of green signals. He had seen the fall of 3 colonies, the burning of his homeworld. He had buried too many under alien fire. Yet now, as he watched the Armada come alive, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Pride. "Look at them," he muttered. His crew turned their eyes to the screens where ships were forming into wings and battle groups. "We are not broken anymore. We are fire," the enemy did not yet see. Alien scouts patrolled the edges of systems, blind to the storm forming in the dark. They had grown too arrogant, too sure of their victory. To them, humans were scattered prey running to be hunted. They did not know an Armada had returned from the grave. They did not know the battlefield was about to burn. On the carrier Solace, pilots prepared their fighters. Many had flown alone for years, hiding in asteroid fields, striking weak convoys. Now they stood together, squadrons rebuilt, wings lined up in hangars. They painted symbols on their ships, fire, lightning, broken swords turned upright again. One pilot traced the word Firestorm across her hull in rough strokes. "Why Firestorm?" another asked her. "Because if we're going to die," she answered, "we'll take the galaxy with us." Across the fleet, voices echoed similar vows. No one spoke of survival. No one promised victory. What they promised was fire, an end so fierce the enemy would never forget. Then came the voice again, the same anonymous transmission that had first called them. It spoke once more across every comm channel, carried on every frequency, old and cracked but unshakable. "The Armada is awake. The enemy thinks us broken. They see only ashes. But ashes can burn again. Firestorm begins now," the words struck deep. Crews shouted them back, repeating them as if they were oath and prayer. The comms filled with overlapping voices, louder and louder, until the dead star's silence was drowned. Formations locked into place, thousands of ships aligned, their courses tightening into perfect order. Dreadnoughts took the lead. Carriers flanked them, destroyers formed walls of steel, and frigates spread wide like knives. Fighters swarmed out of hangars, filling space with a storm of engines and light. It was not just a fleet anymore. It was an armada. The dark around the dead star glowed with the light of humanity's return. Anyone watching would have sworn the star itself was reborn, shining again after 1,000,000 years. But this was no natural fire. This was warfire. This was the storm before the inferno. The captains knew the enemy would sense them soon. Alien fleets would detect the sudden energy surge. Scouts would vanish. Signals would be intercepted. The enemy would come. But this time humanity was not hiding. This time they would not run. The Armada was awake and it hungered. The aliens had grown used to silence. For years their fleets moved through human systems like predators across empty fields, finding only broken resistance. Their ships, sleek and monstrous, cut through space with ease. They mocked the humans, calling them the Ash People, the race that burned quickly and was gone. But now, something was wrong. At the edge of a star system once held by humans, alien scouts began to notice small signals, faint at first, like the static of dead radios. then stronger. Engines firing. Ships moving. The scouts relayed their findings back to their commanders, expecting laughter. But no one laughed. Not this time, reports grew. A frigate spotted dozens of human vessels flying in formation. Another scout vanished, torn apart by railgun fire before it could send its last signal. Then another. And another. The alien commanders frowned. Humans were not supposed to move in packs anymore. They were supposed to crawl alone, desperate and starving. Yet now the void was whispering a different story. The aliens sent larger fleets to investigate. Cruisers and carriers slid through the dark, sensors sweeping, weapons primed. They searched asteroid belts, dead planets, broken stations. They found traces, fuel trails, heat signatures, fragments of communication. Something was gathering. "This is impossible," one alien commander hissed aboard his warship, his voice like grinding stone. His species had crushed hundreds of civilizations before. None had resisted this long. None had dared to rise again after falling. The humans are finished. This cannot be more than a trap. Yet even as he said it, he felt unease. For every scout that returned with half-truths, 2 more vanished. For every dead system, another showed signs of life. Engine burns, weapon discharges, fleeting shadows of fleets moving together. It was not silence anymore. It was motion. Deep in their war councils, alien strategists argued. Some demanded immediate destruction, burn every suspected human ship, leave nothing behind. Others laughed and dismissed the reports. Humans are desperate vermin, they said. They gather like insects before the fire takes them. But one strategist, older than the rest, leaned forward and whispered, "This is no gathering of insects. This is something older, something dangerous. They are not prey anymore." His words unsettled the others, but none dared admit fear. Meanwhile, in the black between stars, the Armada was already on the move. The aliens did not yet see it fully, but they felt its shadow. Human ships darted in and out of systems, ambushing patrols, striking convoys, vanishing before reinforcements arrived. It was not random. It was coordinated, and the coordination meant something terrifying. Command. Someone or something was leading them. Alien morale began to shift. Captains who once mocked human weakness now spoke of their stubborn fire. Crews muttered in private about the fleet of ashes, a ghost armada that struck from nowhere. Some began to hesitate, slowing their patrols, glancing at their sensors too often. Arrogance was cracking. Then came the first true test. An alien battle group of 20 warships entered a system where strange signals had been reported. They expected a handful of human vessels easy prey. Instead, they found themselves surrounded. From the dark, a swarm of frigates and destroyers erupted, weapons blazing. Carriers released squadrons of fighters, their engines streaking like fire across the black. Railguns thundered, plasma cut through armor, explosions ripped the sky apart. The aliens fought hard, their weapons fierce. But the humans did not scatter. They fought as one. Every strike had purpose, every maneuver woven into the next. The aliens had never seen humans fight like this. It was not desperation. It was fury. In less than an hour, the battle group was reduced to wreckage. Survivors fled, carrying with them not just the shame of defeat, but the horror of what they had witnessed. "They have returned," one captain reported, his voice trembling. "An armada. The humans have an armada." The word spread like wildfire through alien fleets. At first, many refused to believe. But as more patrols vanished, as more reports came, the truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity was no longer crawling in shadows. Humanity was rising. Alien leaders gathered in great halls of steel and fire, their faces grim. They argued, they shouted, but fear lurked in every corner of their voices. They had underestimated the Ash people. They thought humanity broken. But the battlefield was shifting. The hunt was no longer theirs alone. Somewhere beyond their reach, the Armada waited, hidden in the dark, growing stronger with every day. And though the aliens still laughed in public, still claimed victory was certain, the older ones remembered. They remembered what humanity had been when it first resisted, the rage, the fire, the refusal to bow. Now, as alien fleets spread out to search, unease rippled through their ranks. Every shadow in space looked like a trap. Every silence felt heavy with danger. The hunters had begun to feel hunted, and in that silence the Armada prepared to strike again. The Armada moved like a shadow at first, drifting silent through the stars. No music of trumpets, no banners of victory, only steel and fire waiting to be unleashed. For days the fleet remained hidden, sliding between asteroid fields and dead moons, watching the enemy spread themselves thin. The captains spoke little, the crews worked in silence. Every man and woman aboard those ships carried the same thought. This was not just another skirmish. This was the beginning. At the edge of the Redan system, alien warships gathered. 20 carriers, 30 destroyers, and dozens of cruisers formed a wall of black metal around the system's core. They were confident, certain the humans would never dare to strike openly. Their commanders laughed at the whispers of an armada. They believed it was a myth, a story meant to give the dying race false hope. They were wrong. The armada arrived in silence, engines cutting as they drifted into position. From the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Tempest, Admiral Corrin stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed from years of loss, but his voice was calm. "Firestorm begins," he said, and the dark exploded. Every human warship powered weapons at once. Railguns fired, their shells ripping across space faster than light could chase them. Plasma cannons burned, cutting great scars through alien armor. Torpedoes streaked forward, guided by codes long hidden, striking the heart of enemy formations. The first volley alone crippled half a dozen cruisers, sending them tumbling in flames. The aliens had no time to laugh now. They scrambled, firing wildly into the black. But the armada was not chaos. It was order, fury shaped into precision. Frigates darted forward, weaving between enemy ships, striking engines and retreating before counterfire could lock on. Destroyers formed walls of fire, their guns pouring ceaseless volleys to pin the aliens in place. Carriers unleashed swarms of fighters, thousands of small ships diving and rising, painting the void with streaks of burning light. The dreadnoughts came last. Their cannons roared like gods of war, each blast tearing entire chunks from enemy carriers. The shockwaves rippled through space, shaking even the human ships that fired them. It was not battle anymore. It was firestorm. The aliens fought back with savage force. Their beams sliced through human cruisers, turning steel into molten rivers. Fighters screamed into dogfights, their weapons clawing at human swarms. A carrier named Solace took a direct hit to its engines and began to fall, flames tearing across its decks. But instead of retreating, its surviving pilots launched in one final wave, driving themselves into the heart of enemy formations. They burned, but they burned bright. From every viewport, the battlefield was a sea of red and white light. Explosions chained across the void like storms. Wreckage drifted in clouds, sparks glowing against the endless dark. Crew members shouted over comms, voices raw with fear and fury. "They're breaking the line. Hold formation. Push them back. For Earth! For the fallen!" One frigate, already burning, rammed itself into the side of an alien destroyer. The impact lit both ships like suns, the shockwave tearing nearby fighters apart. On another front, a human squadron lured alien interceptors into the firing range of a hidden railgun platform. The result was devastating. Dozens of alien fighters ripped apart in seconds. Admiral Corrin watched the chaos unfold, his face hard as steel. "Do not give them space to breathe," he ordered. "The battlefield is fire now. Burn them in it." The armada obeyed. Alien commanders screamed orders, desperate to regroup, but every attempt collapsed under the pressure of human coordination. For years, the aliens had seen humans scatter like prey. Now they saw them fight like a storm. Every strike had meaning, every ship moved with purpose. It was as if the armada itself was alive. The first alien carrier broke, its hull split down the middle by the Iron Tempest's main cannon. Its wreck drifted through the battle like a corpse, fire spreading across its broken decks. The sight sent shock through the alien ranks. For the first time, they hesitated. For the first time, they knew fear. Yet the price was heavy. Human ships burned just as brightly. The Vanguard, a cruiser with 2,000 souls aboard, vanished in a single explosion when alien plasma pierced its reactor. Entire squadrons of fighters were wiped out in dogfights that left nothing but ashes. Every victory was paid for with blood. Still, the armada pressed forward. The firestorm did not fade, it grew. From the black silence of despair, humanity had built a storm of fury. And now that storm swept across the Redan system, tearing through the alien fleet with relentless force. For every human ship that fell, 2 alien warships burned. For every pilot lost, 3 enemies were driven into wreckage. The void itself seemed to burn, lit by the fire of war. And in that fire, humanity found its voice again. They were not prey. They were not ashes. They were the Armada, and the battlefield belonged to them now. The battlefield was still burning when the true weight of the fight began to fall. Wreckage floated in every direction. Shattered carriers, broken wings of fighters, fragments of steel spinning endlessly in the void. The Armada had struck with fury and the aliens had bled. But fire always demanded a price, and now the price was being paid. On the cruiser Vanguard's gravesite, silence lingered. Thousands gone in one flash. Their ship torn apart by alien plasma. Nearby, the frigate Silver Spear drifted. Engines dead, fires crawling across its hull. Its captain, face lit by dying alarms, gave one final order. Ram them. The frigate turned with what little power it had left and threw itself at an alien destroyer. The impact shattered both ships in a burst of light so bright it seemed to wake the stars themselves. Acts like this were not rare. They were constant. The Armada fought as one, but within that unity were countless single choices made by crews who knew survival was no longer their goal. Every sacrifice carved a hole in the enemy line. Every death made room for the Armada to breathe. On the carrier Solace, the deck was chaos. Fires spread across ruined hangars. Pilots leapt into their fighters even as the ship's hull groaned from enemy fire. One woman, helmet cracked and arm bleeding, climbed into her cockpit with shaking hands. "Launch me," she said, voice steady. Her fighter tore into the black, joining others in a desperate swarm that crashed directly into alien bombers. None returned. But the bombers never reached the fleet. Admiral Corrin watched from the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Tempest. His tactical display flickered with losses. Green lights vanishing, red flaring in their place. He stood motionless, his jaw set, his voice low. "Hold the line. If they burn, we burn them back," but inside even he felt the cracks. Every time a cruiser vanished from his display, every time a squadron signal went dark, it cut deeper. He knew these crews. He had trained with them, bled with them, watched them laugh in brighter days. Now their names were written only in silence. The enemy pressed harder. Alien cruisers swarmed, beams carving through human formations. A massive battleship broke into the center of the Armada, its weapons blazing. The humans scrambled, but they were too slow. The alien ship's cannons charged, ready to shatter half the fleet in a single volley. Then the Resolute moved. A human destroyer, half its armor gone, engines leaking fire, surged forward at full speed. Its captain broadcast his final words across every open channel. For the Armada, for humanity, for the fallen. The Resolute slammed into the alien battleship just as its cannons reached full charge. The explosion ripped the alien ship apart from within, tearing it into fragments. The shockwave rolled through the battlefield, shaking every vessel that remained. For a moment, the Armada froze. Then comms filled with voices, raw and furious. "They gave us this chance. Don't waste it!" The Armada surged again, pressing the advantage carved by sacrifice. In smaller corners of the fight, countless stories unfolded. Engineers sealed themselves in reactor rooms, keeping ships alive even as flames swallowed them. Medics worked through broken corridors, patching wounds with trembling hands, whispering promises they knew were lies. Pilots flew with broken wings, guiding their ships like arrows into enemy engines. Every sacrifice was a torch. Every death lit the battlefield brighter, but the cost was unbearable. Hundreds of ships gone, thousands of lives extinguished. The Armada held, but it bled. Even victories felt like wounds. On the bridge of the Iron Tempest, Corrin's officers turned to him, their faces pale. "We can't keep this pace," one said. "We're tearing them apart, but they're tearing us apart too." Corrin's eyes stayed locked on the battlefield. His voice was quiet, almost like prayer. "Then let the storm decide. If this is our fire, we burn until nothing is left." The alien fleet began to waver. Command ships shattered, formations broken. Fear spread through their ranks as human ships, scarred, bleeding, but relentless, closed in. The price paid in sacrifice was breaking the enemy's will. As another alien carrier exploded, cheers erupted across human comms. But the cheers were hollow. Everyone knew the names of those who would never answer again. They carried pride and grief in equal measure, fire and ash together. The Armada did not retreat. It could not. Every ship that still flew pressed forward, carrying the weight of the fallen. And though the void was filled with wreckage, though silence claimed thousands more souls, one truth burned brighter than all the destruction. The Armada lived. It lived because of the few who had chosen to give everything. It lived because sacrifice had become its greatest weapon. In the firestorm of that night, humanity proved a truth the enemy had never understood. They could break ships. They could burn worlds, but they could never extinguish the will to fight. Not while even one soul was willing to burn so others could strike. The firestorm had raged for hours, and space itself seemed torn apart by the fury of war. Wreckage drifted everywhere. Broken ships, shattered wings of fighters, glowing fragments that spun silently in the void. The Armada was bleeding, but so were the aliens. The difference was clear now. The humans refused to stop. Alien fleets had expected desperation. They had expected chaos, fear, and collapse. What they found instead was something they had never faced. Discipline sharpened by rage. Every human ship fought with purpose, every squadron moved as if part of one mind. It was not survival that drove them anymore. It was fire. On the dreadnought Iron Tempest, Admiral Corrin stood unmoving, watching the tactical display shift. Alien formations that had once looked unstoppable were now full of gaps. Command ships burned. Carriers drifted without escorts. Destroyers turned in confusion, unable to reform lines under the storm. "This is the moment," Corrin said softly, his voice calm but heavy. "We break them here." Across the Armada, captains heard the order. Frigates surged forward, darting through debris fields like knives. Squadrons of fighters poured out of carriers, their engines glowing like falling stars. Destroyers and cruisers moved into flanking arcs, railguns primed, torpedoes locked. Then the dreadnoughts fired. Their cannons roared in unison, beams of light tearing through the center of the alien fleet. One enemy battleship split in half, its broken core spilling fire across space. Another carrier exploded, the blast scattering its escorts into wreckage. The shock rippled through the alien lines like a wave of terror. For the first time they broke. Alien ships began to fall back, formations unraveling. Orders screamed across their channels, but panic spread faster than discipline. Ships fled in different directions, leaving their comrades to burn. The humans pressed harder. A wing of destroyers cut through the flank, hammering retreating ships with relentless volleys. Frigates swarmed damaged cruisers, stabbing them with torpedoes until they burst. Fighters hunted survivors, weaving through fire and wreckage, striking engines before darting away. Everywhere the aliens turned, they found fire waiting. On the carrier Solace the Tune, rebuilt from scraps after its sister ship's fall, pilots shouted with raw fury as they tore through enemy squadrons. "Push them back," one voice cried. Another added, "Make them run." The comms filled with laughter, not of joy but of vengeance. Even in their grief, the humans had found strength. The enemy tried one last counterattack. A massive warship, black as the void, surged into the fight with its weapons blazing. Its cannons tore through a human cruiser in one volley, its beams slicing squadrons apart. For a moment, fear flickered again, but the Armada answered as one. Frigates rushed it from below, guns blazing. Destroyers hammered it from the sides. Fighters swarmed its surface, planting charges on its armor. And from above, the Iron Tempest's main cannon charged with a blinding glow. "Fire," Corrin said. The beam cut through the alien warship from bow to stern, splitting it apart in a blast so bright it washed out sensors. When the light faded, nothing remained but fragments. Silence spread for a heartbeat across both fleets. Then the aliens broke completely. Their retreat turned into a rout. Carriers turned and fled, their escorts scattering in panic. Cruisers overloaded their engines, desperate to escape. Fighters abandoned dogfights and fled toward the edges of the system. The Armada did not let them go. Human ships pressed the chase, tearing apart stragglers, hammering fleeing warships until they burned. The firestorm spread behind the retreat, leaving a trail of wreckage so wide it could be seen from across the system. In the chaos, voices filled the Armada's comms. "We're driving them back. They're running." They're actually running. For Earth. For humanity. Tears fell on some bridges. Laughter rang on others. The Armada had seen too much death to cheer without grief, but victory tasted sharper because of it. The aliens, once hunters, now fled like prey. They had believed humans broken, ashes scattered to the dark. But now they learned the truth. Humans did not scatter. They gathered. They burned together. On the bridge of the Iron Tempest, Corrin finally allowed himself a long breath. His eyes remained hard, but the shadow of despair that had haunted him for years was gone. "We've shown them," he said quietly. "We've shown them who we are. The fleet continued to press until the last alien ships vanished into the void. Then slowly the Armada regrouped. The battlefield was theirs. All around, wreckage glowed, drifting silently like tombstones in the dark. Thousands of human souls had been lost, their ships torn apart in sacrifice, yet the Armada still lived. And more than that, it had turned the tide. The firestorm was no longer a desperate strike. It was the beginning of something larger. The enemy had seen fear for the first time. They had learned that humanity would not vanish quietly. In the silence that followed, one voice came across the comms, trembling but strong. "We are still here," and across the Armada thousands repeated it, a whisper that grew into a roar. "We are still here." The fire had not died. It had only begun to spread. The battlefield was quiet at last, though it was not the quiet of peace. Wreckage floated in every direction, broken hulls spinning slowly, sparks flickering against the endless dark. Fire still burned inside shattered ships, their light fading like dying stars. The Armada had won, but the silence felt heavy, as if the void itself was mourning. On the bridge of the Iron Tempest, Admiral Corrin stood in the dim glow of consoles. The tactical display showed what remained: too many ships gone, too many signals silent. Yet the Armada was not destroyed. Against all odds, against every shadow of despair, it still lived. "Count the survivors," he ordered softly. His officers worked quickly, voices low. The numbers came in slowly, each one cutting deep. Entire squadrons erased. Carriers gone. Crews lost to the firestorm. And yet for every loss a green light remained. Hundreds of ships scarred but still alive. Thousands of men and women breathing, fighting, refusing to fall. Corrin closed his eyes. The cost was unbearable, but it was not for nothing. Across the fleet, voices began to rise. On frigates, crews gathered in ruined corridors, patching hulls with bare hands. On carriers, pilots returned from battle with tears and laughter mixed together. On cruisers, medics worked tirelessly, saving whoever could still be saved. Everywhere, humans spoke the same words in hushed tones. "We are still here." The Armada had turned despair into fury, and fury into survival. Now, for the first time, they felt something else, something they had thought lost forever. Hope. But hope was fragile. It did not erase the pain. Families were gone. Worlds were ashes. Even now, the enemy still ruled most of the stars. This victory was only a spark, and sparks could die, unless they became fire. On the carrier Solace de Secu, a young pilot stood by the viewport staring at the wreckage field. She thought of her squadron, every friend who had not returned. She whispered their names under her breath, as if each one was fuel to the fire burning in her chest. Then she said the words she had heard on the comms, the words that had carried them through the storm. "We are still here." Her voice was not alone. Comms across the Armada lit up as survivors spoke the phrase together. Broken voices, weary voices, voices of grief and rage. But together they became something stronger. The enemy had fled, but they would return. The humans knew this. They knew the war was far from over. But now the enemy would come with fear. They would remember the firestorm, the dreadnoughts awakening, the fleet that refused to die. They would no longer see humanity as prey. Admiral Corrin turned to his officers. His voice was quiet, steady, but filled with iron. "The galaxy will know what happened here. They will know that when hope was gone, we became fire." The Armada began to regroup. Signals spread across the fleet. Captains reporting status, engineers promising repairs, medics listing survivors. What had been a desperate strike was now something greater. It was the rebirth of humanity's strength. The dead star that had hidden their gathering now shone with new light. Not its own, but the glow of engines and weapons charging again. What had once been a grave had become a beacon. Corrin opened a wide-channel broadcast, his face appearing across every ship, every screen, every fighter cockpit. His words were simple, spoken in plain, steady tones that carried across the void. "We stand in fire and ash. We have paid in blood. But we are not finished. Humanity does not die here. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Firestorm will spread, and we will carry it to every battlefield until the stars themselves remember our name. Humanity fights. Humanity burns. Humanity survives." Silence followed his speech for a heartbeat. Then, from thousands of throats across the Armada, a roar of voices answered, "We are still here." It was not just a cry of survival. It was a vow, The enemy would feel that vow in every battle to come. The firestorm was not a single strike, it was a chain reaction. The Armada would grow, gathering more survivors, rebuilding, rising stronger. Humanity's rage had turned the battlefield to fire once. It would do so again. Out in the void, alien fleets regrouped, whispering of the defeat they had suffered. Fear crept into their councils. They spoke of the Ash People, the race they thought broken. Now they spoke of the Armada, the fleet of fire. They knew the war was not won. They knew the storm was only beginning. Back in the Redan system, the Armada lit its engines. Ships turned slowly, aligning together once more. The battlefield behind them glowed with wreckage, but ahead lay the stars and the next fight. The humans did not look back. They carried their dead with them, not as chains, but as fire. Every loss was fuel. Every sacrifice was flame. The Armada moved forward, and the silence of space seemed to shiver. From ashes they had risen. From despair they had found fury, and now that fury had become fire. The war was far from over, but the galaxy would never forget the day when hope was gone, and humanity answered with fire.